Welcome to the Grief Ladies, the practical guide to what comes next. I'm Kelly Doherty.
And I'm Karyn Arnold, and we are two grief professionals with over 50 years of combined experience. We're here to validate, educate, and give you tangible tools you can actually use.
Each episode motivates you to take action and reminds you it's okay to want to feel better. This is the Grief Ladies, a guide to what comes next. And welcome back to the Grief Ladies podcast. I'm Kelly.
And I'm Karyn, and we're really glad to have you here. We are in our second week of holiday videos. And this week we are talking about R. So, Kelly, you want to remind us what the grief framework is and what R represents here?
Yeah, absolutely. So our framework is built on the word grief. So we have grounding, rebuilding, interacting, evolving, and finding. And today's focus, our next trail marker that we're going to be focusing on is rebuilding.
Okay. I'm going to say they're all important. I just think this one especially maybe is where people see a huge amount of change. You know, the structure of their day, their routine, all of the rhythms just being off. You know, and that could be because we lost someone that we shared living space with, and that we had all of our routine and dinner and what we're doing this weekend and what we're doing this afternoon all tied to that person, or we were a caregiver and we find that our day is looking very, very different. I find most people that are grieving find themselves with this time that they're not quite sure how to fill, what to do with. And as we have developed this framework, we're really wanting to emphasize to people how important it is to be putting some decisions and choices back in to that routine and to that structure and to prioritize it. You know,
Yeah.
and it doesn't seem important necessarily. Again, what difference does it make? But we know that it does.
And I think, bringing in the holiday season is where it can get really tricky
Yeah.
because we can maybe have a good routine. We go to bed at a certain time, we get up at a certain time, we eat, certain meals at a certain time. And then there's all of these obligations during the holidays, the holiday parties and the get togethers and the travel, and everything can be totally thrown off.
Yeah.
And so I think this one is probably, can be quite challenging for people while they're grieving because they feel like they're doing well. And I don't know, even for me, like the holidays just, well, having a holiday work party late at night, things like that. It just throws everything off.
Yeah.
And so it can just even compound grief even more and make it even more exhausting and overwhelming.
Yeah. Well, and so Kelly, you're in your first year of grief, having lost your dad. And so, there's being in that position and trying to even figure out what I'm going to be doing this year and how I'm going to get through it. But then it also speaks to the people who maybe have been doing this for a few years, maybe have started to establish a little bit of a routine, but there's still just all those other people and the expectations and maybe new things that can come up. So it kind of speaks to the fact that even if we feel further along and like I've done this before, it can still be really challenging, really exhausting. It's just a time of year most people want to just get on the other side of, that's what I find.
Yeah, absolutely. And later down the road, we're going to be talking about how to deal with the other side, right?
Yep,
When we
yep,
get
we're
on
going to
that,
get to that.
because there's their own challenges there.
There are, and it's important to know that, that's the thing about grief. It's not like there's times that are easier, but I think this time just feels heavy. So our hope today is to be able to address some questions that people have during this time. So the first one actually is, how do I not dread upcoming holidays for weeks? So maybe that's where you're at. I mean, we're kind of still in that earlier part of it. And as it looms ahead, I mean, the holiday season's a couple months long. And for some people, it can even feel like it starts like with Halloween, the way that the stores, decorations change over and everything like that. So we're going to talk about that. Like, how do you spend this time, not every second? Because the weird thing is, I always remind people is that the holidays it's a few days, spread over a couple of months. So does every single day leading up to that time have to feel heavy and hard and complicated and exhausting? So we're going to answer that question.
Yeah. And the second question we're going to answer is something that um, I'm dealing with and a lot of my clients are dealing with. And so it's, how do you handle the holidays when they are also the same time of year as maybe when your significant loss occurs?
Mm. Yeah.
And so for me, we buried my dad the day before Thanksgiving last year or 2
Right.
days before. So it was, I know Thanksgiving, we did nothing last year, which was I was quite okay with, but, um, how do you deal with that? So you have the holidays, which are difficult as it is, and then
Right.
maybe you have the death anniversary, or maybe you have your loved one's birthday during that time as well, and it's compounded.
Yeah. It does seem to happen that way where things just get piled up all together.
Mhm.
And, people really, you just don't feel like you get a breather. So if that's your situation, if that speaks to you, like Kelly said, that's definitely what she's dealing with here. I think this will be a good one to listen to. So hopefully it can be a help and we'll be back to tell you a little bit more. Kelly, I have a question for you today. I think the timing is pretty appropriate. And that question is, how do I not dread upcoming holidays for weeks?
Yeah, it's such a valid question because we are in that holiday season, right? I think the beginning of fall is when we kind of start that and we kind of start anticipating all of these holidays, Halloween, Thanksgiving, Christmas, Hanukkah, even New Year's, right? And so I think personally for me, what it comes down to is mindfulness, just being in the present moment, just taking it day by day, not trying to look too forward in the future because when we live in the future, that's when we live with anxiety, right? And we can start overthinking it. One of my clients mentioned the other night, which I think was a really valid thing. She said, Thanksgiving, I'm okay with because, it's just one day. She said, but Christmas, I'm struggling with because it is like, it's weeks of like this anticipation of it, right? And she's like, and everywhere you go, there's reminders of it. And I think that's what makes it so hard is that there is, you go to the grocery store, even just to get regular groceries, and then there's all the holiday stuff out there, and maybe the Christmas trees are outside, or, it's just there's a lot of reminders in this time of year. And so I think it's going back to mindfulness, just be here now, be in the present moment, and just take some self compassion for yourself, be kind to yourself, and choose what you want to do. No is a complete sentence.
Yeah.
And you don't have to say yes to things that you don't want to go to and you don't want to be involved in.
Right. Yeah.
And just, find what works for you. This year, you may say, I don't want to celebrate any holidays, and that's okay. You may want to try again next year, and that's okay. So I think it's also figuring out what you want to do, what your plans are for the year and the holidays. And you can change your mind at the last minute with any of these, even the day of, 5 minutes before you can change your mind. But I do think sometimes having an idea of what you want, what are the traditions that you want to keep, what are the traditions that maybe you want to change. And so then that way you feel like you have a little more control over it as well.
Yeah. Absolutely. Absolutely. And, that mindfulness is such a good piece of advice because one thing I've talked about with people is that and I think we even touched on this before when we were talking about the change of seasons. The holiday season almost starts in like September because people are like, okay, back to school, then Halloween. And it really, if you look at it, it ends up being like almost this 3 month time period, which is a quarter of the year that we are spending thinking about what really amounts to 4 or 5 days.
Mhm.
I mean, if we're really talking about it, Thanksgiving, Christmas Eve, Christmas Day. I mean, we're talking Hanukkah, then we have a few more days and New Year's, and there's other things, but still, for a lot of people, it's a 3 month time period, or at least a 2 month time period that we're really talking about a few different days that you're really focused on. So that's where we have to just kind of focus on. I think having a plan is important. Generally be thinking about how you're going to get through it, reminding yourself that you have survived everything up to this point so far. You don't want to have to do these things, but you will be able to. And when you talk about that idea of focusing on what you want to do, I think sometimes also trying to remember what you don't want to do,
Mhm.
and letting that be a guide as well. Like, I don't want to go to any big, loud parties, or I don't want to go spend time with that person who has not been very helpful or supportive. Like, that can kind of give you a little bit of framework too. And if it's your first year, remembering that this is your first year. And so you're still kind of figuring some things out. If it's your second and third, trying to think about years in the past, what worked, what didn't, and kind of use that to be a guide. Um, But I think, it's the idea of this dread settling in and taking over all the days leading up to it. And it's hard enough getting through the days without having to suffer through everything leading up to it as well, you know?
Well, that anticipatory anxiety, it's, thinking about doing something is usually worse than actually doing it. And for the majority of my clients, I would say not all, but for the majority of them, usually leading up to the day of maybe a birthday or an anniversary of the death or even a holiday is usually worse than the actual day is.
Yeah.
And some obviously the day sucks and have a hard time. And some people have a more of what I call like the grief hangover the day after. Um,
Yeah.
but for a lot of people, it's leading up to the day. And so just even that awareness and knowing that, okay, maybe I just have to get through this and just take it minute by minute. Not even day by day. Sometimes day by day is too much. So sometimes just minute by minute, feel what you feel. Maybe reach out to support, find others that care. I know my coping with the holiday groups are always very full because there's a lot of people out there struggling. The holidays don't necessarily mean it's a happy time for everyone. And it doesn't just have to be due to death, right? There's estrangement in families, there's people that have moved away, change in um, your location or your identity. There's things that can make holidays really isolating for a lot of people.
Absolutely. Absolutely. And I think along the way here, we're going to be giving some more like practical tips and things that you can do to try to help survive it. But definitely knowing that you're not alone, that this is really a lot of people that find it to be challenging and that they're just trying to get through. And sometimes that's all we can do, is just to try to get through it. So Kelly, if you had to sort of summarize, what a person can do to help avoid that dread of the holidays, what would you say?
I would say to just practice that mindfulness, be in the present moment, take it minute by minute. Try not to live too far in the future, just try to live in the now. And if you are really worried about that, try to make some plans for yourself, thinking about what you do and do not want for the holidays, and knowing that you can always change your mind at the last minute. And then coming back to the self compassion piece, being kind to yourself, giving yourself what you need, taking care of yourself, engaging in self care techniques and coping skills, and just giving yourself that same kindness you would give somebody else. Are the holidays or harder days in grief weighing on you?
We get it. We've been supporting grieving people for decades, and we know how overwhelming it could feel.
That's why we've teamed up to launch Grief Ladies, a new space for practical, compassionate support after loss.
And you're invited to our free launch event on November 19th. You'll get a first look at our grief framework, our live talk on handling the harder days in grief, and a special take-home guide just for live attendees.
Reserve your free spot today and join us on November 19th at 4 p.m. Eastern, and the link to register will be in the show notes.
We'd love to see you there.
So we're in that holiday season, Karyn, and we're continuing to talk about that because it can be such a difficult time for people who are grieving. And so today's question comes from someone who said, how do you handle the holidays when they also signify the time of year that your significant loss or other losses have occurred?
Yeah, so you and I were talking about this a little bit before, and I think it's almost surprised me at times throughout my years of doing this how often this is the case.
Mm.
That, we talk about the holidays, it's hard for everybody, but we also know that anniversaries, of loss are very difficult. And for some people, they coincide and they're happening at the same time. And I think that adds a whole different layer to it where people just feel very, very overwhelmed, and it can be the loss. I mean, that the question is asking about the anniversary, but I've had people where maybe their wedding anniversary falls around the same time, their birthday, their loved one's birthday, or maybe it was the time around the diagnosis or the time where they spent significant amount of time in the hospital, or, that was kind of like the beginning of the end sort of thing. I mean, there's so many different ways that that can happen, and again, it's not that uncommon. So in terms of trying to cope with that, I think it's definitely a matter of recognizing that you're going through a very difficult time, and that's going to be amplified by everything going on around you. One thing I know is that leading up to the anniversary for people, that first year is all about the firsts, and all the different triggers. And here's all, the first time I have to do this and the first time I have to do this. But that time leading up to the anniversary of the loss becomes all about the last, and this is the
Yeah.
last time we talked to them, and this is the last time everything was okay, or this is the last time I was able to see them. And it's like our memory gets really, really good for that. And I think probably the holidays also intensifies that because being out in your grocery store, and seeing the decorations or the food and the things that they put out or just around town, the lights being up, you remember like this is what I saw this time last year. This was the temperature of the air, like, all of those things that you were very passively aware of the year before are now right there and are creating even more triggers for you. So it's not even that the advice is different in terms of how to get through the holidays versus how to get through the anniversary of a loss. And in those cases, we talk about, being gentle and kind with yourself. We've talked about mindfulness. I think having a plan is really important, to think about how specifically you want to get through this day. Am I going to be taking off of work? Do I want to be around other people? Do I want to be on my own? All those sorts of things, that's going to stay the same. But I think when we're talking about this kind of double shot of grief, it just means we have to double down on the self-care and on the things that we're not going to take on. And like, this is not the year to be maybe hosting or running around and buying unique and special gifts for everybody or, committing yourself to a bunch of different commitments. Like, you may just have to really bring it down to the simple and basic so that you can try and survive it. So, yeah, Kelly, you were saying you hear this a lot, right, with people?
Yes, it's amazing how many of my clients,
Yeah,
you know, they have multiple things and it's just like boom, 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 boom. It's just exhausting because
yeah,
it's so back and, and again, it comes back to taking it a day at a time, right? And I agree with having a plan. I'm a big believer that on anniversaries or death anniversaries, whatever you want to call them, really having a plan for that day. What does that look like? And being realistic about that.
mm.
I had somebody I recently worked with, and the things that they wanted to accomplish that day, they wanted to go to everywhere that she loved, everywhere, all in one day. And I was like, that sounds really tiring. And I think they maybe got to half of them. But, maybe it's making a ritual. I'm a big believer in rituals. I think they're really important and an important part of our grief experience and making that space and that time. And so maybe it's doing some sort of ritual. It could be as simple as lighting a candle and, putting their picture out. It could be something more elaborate where, maybe you get together with a group of people and you do what are those things called that you light up in the
Oh,
air?
the lanterns?
The lanterns, which
Yeah,
I
yeah,
legal in most states, but people still do them.
yeah,
I know they're illegal in here in New York, and I hear them being going up all the time, but, doing something like that. Back in the day when I worked at hospice, we used to do balloon releases. Now I know that's a little
yeah.
not necessarily encouraged, but, just finding something like that, connecting with people that share that loss with you, or maybe it's something that you wanna do by yourself that day, and you just have to figure out what works for you.
Yeah.
And so having a plan for that and then also having a plan for the holidays, like, and just knowing that, like, I can just have to take it day by day and you will get through it. Will it be hard? Absolutely. But you will. And it's just about, again, that self-care, making sure you're taking breaks from your grief as well and trying to find some things to do that you enjoy.
Mhm. Absolutely. I find, again, kind of going back even a little bit separate from the holidays, but, trying to honor that day of loss. I think people put a lot of pressure on themselves. I have done this in my own personal losses. Like, I'm trying to think, okay, what can I do? And you find yourself not even purposefully, but like you're trying to find the thing that was so important to them. Like, I just want to find something that speaks to who they were and what they meant to me, and, something that just kind of fits their personality and that can show the magnitude of my love and how much I miss them and how deep my grief is. And it's like, what is that? Like, how does that,
Puts
like,
a
what could,
lot of pressure on yourself.
yes, like, what could be that thing? I mean, is there really anything that could really honor and signify the depth of the love or the depth of the grief? Really, there's probably not. So the smaller things I think actually end up being more significant than we would realize if we allow it. Lighting a candle, taking those moments can be really lovely. And what I say to people too is that, those days, yes, are going to be about that person, but they also need to be about you having to be here trying to get through it. So
Absolutely.
don't think this 24 hours has to be spent, constantly trying to figure out like what's important. Like, even if you end up with like an hour of some sort of like remembrance, and then the rest of the day is you on the couch, like
Yeah.
watching Netflix and ordering takeout, like that's okay. That's okay. It's about you having to get through it.
All right. So to summarize, Karen, would you answer? How do you handle the holidays when they also signify the time of the year that your significant loss occurred?
Well, I think like most things, we're just, trying to start with validating like this is hard. It's all hard, but that's a real double whammy. And if you're feeling it, it's justified, because those are a lot of things. So making sure that you are making a plan, being mindful of how much you are committing yourself to, what else that you may be taking on, recognizing the weight of the approaching anniversary of the loss, and then coupled with the holidays, and how it may just need to look very different, right now, and that's okay.
Well, I hope those answers to those questions were helpful for you. We would love to hear from you. Send us a message or leave a comment. And if you've been listening, you know that we end every week with an actionable step because we do believe there are things that can help you on your grief journey. So, based on our framework of rebuilding, Karen, what is our listeners' actionable step for this week?
Well, as we said, we're trying to form it in the idea of a gift that you can be giving yourself, to really be prioritizing yourself through this time. Hopefully, doing it all the time, but maybe especially now. So that gentle routine is really important. Something predictable, something that you can count on, something that you can control, something that you get to decide. So it could be something simple like lighting a candle, same time every day, or part of your evening routine. You could keep a simple morning routine that grounds you, so that even if the days are busier with other activities or other things, that there's some predictability. Because a lot of times I think that's what's lost, is it just feels like sometimes we're being dragged along by life and we don't know what's coming next. So these are small things, but we know the small things are big things. And really, the hope and the idea is that this can create a little bit of an anchor, something to tether yourself to, through this holiday season when it feels unpredictable or heavy. Just little touch points of stability for yourself. It would be really important to give that a try.
Yeah, absolutely. What a great gift we can give to ourselves, right?
Absolutely.
Well, thanks for listening. And we will be back next week with our next trail marker, which is interacting. And we're going to be talking about balancing solitude, family, and social expectations during the holiday season. So take care. Thanks for joining us on the Grief Ladies.
Don't wait to feel better to get started. Getting started is what makes you feel better. Put this week's tool to work.
If today's episode helped, share it with someone who needs it and leave us a review. We'd love to hear from you.
And remember, we're here for you, your trusted grief ladies, navigating this path together.